Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
I'm Alistair.
And this fortnight we'll be talking about the third and final season of grim Gen Z, the teens aren't all right drama Euphoria, although I guess now technically they're in their early 20s. And we will also be moving into another shade of murderous dystopia in the comic series Exquisite Corpses by James Tynion and Michael Walsh. But before all of that misery, Alistair, have you got anything happy to talk about?
No. That's a short answer. Well, that's something that gave me great joy, but I'm here to talk about a horror film. Buckle in, this is going to be a grim episode. Yeah, so I went to see indie cinema sensation The Backrooms, and I must say it's always nice when something you're into becomes the talk of the town, especially when it becomes the talk of the town because it's really good. See also June films, but yeah, this is The Backrooms film, directed by Kane Parsons, based on his series of viral Blender-based short films on YouTube and a sort of wider Backrooms meme, bringing it very much into the mainstream with a film that's been a big hit, and yeah, deservedly so, because it's a really good film. If you're a fan of horror, I think you'll definitely like this. If you're a fan of films that are a bit weird, a bit off kilter, I think you'll enjoy this. Obviously, if you like the Backrooms and that whole, aesthetic and all the ideas behind it, then yeah, you'll like this. First thing to say, I guess, is that it is genuinely quite scary horror movie. It's not possibly the scariest film I've ever sat through, but it's definitely got a lot of good scares, and it's consistently scary, which is an achievement in itself, considering what he's made before are a series of short films. I mean, some of the longer ones are up to about 45 minutes, and he's good at building, from these films, he's good at building atmosphere, he's good at building tension, good at a few jump scares, but turning that into 2-hour film is a bit of a challenge. So they've added other layers, built out the lore a little bit, but not in a sort of tedious way, and added some more layers and some more complexity to it to make something that is genuinely quite scary and also genuinely enthralling. So if you're on the fence about this, go see it.
Obviously we watched the Backrooms YouTube videos as part of one of our recommendation episodes a few months ago, and I thought they were really interesting, some good lore building. Was interested to see what they do with this in a movie setting, and I'm kind of disappointed I couldn't make seeing this, but and I'm glad to hear it was good. It's done really well, I think. I've seen a lot of decent reviews and strong box office numbers, so it seems to have successfully translated its viral success into actual real world success.
The Guardian gave it 5 stars. I think it's number 1. I believe Kane Parsons is the youngest director ever to have a number 1 film, because he's still in his early 20s. I think weirdly he's vying with the director of Obsession that came out recently for that title, who's also in the early 20s and also made a viral hit horror movie. But it works. I mean, it opens with a sequence that's very familiar to people who've seen the video, so you kind of get the first 5 minutes is basically a little Backrooms online first person sort of scientist exploring this space. So he does that, and then it kind of goes out into something broader, and similar to Exit 8 that we also discussed. It's also a liminal space horror thing. What they've done here is they've added more character and characterization, because like I say, this is not just a short film or a video game. There needs to be some kind of meaty characterization to it to make it entertaining. There's then quite a bit, they build up these characters and their lives, before they stumble into the back rooms. That's well done, and it's certainly better than Exit 8 because the characterization isn't so light touch, and also it's just a bit sort of better. I mean, what they went for Exit 8 was the most basic thing, which is someone who feels a bit lost in life and is unsure about becoming a father, whereas these characters are more emotionally complex. They went for an interesting thing, which is the main character played by, and I can never pronounce it, I'm so sorry, Ejiofor. He's in therapy, so which is useful for having scenes of him talking to his therapist, which is a good way to expand his psychology, which does make the film more emotionally and psychologically complex, which is what again you need for that. I won't say any spoilers, but there's a lot of good liminal space horror, but there's also an element of, in the best horror films, that actually people are the scariest thing, not bizarre other dimensional monsters. But I'll leave it there because we might do a full review at some point.
Maybe, I did assume that for an actual film they'd need to build something more substantial in terms of story on top of the lore. I guess he's done, if nothing else, he's done the world building. There's quite a lot of lore available via his YouTube work, so it's probably pretty easy for a decent writer to go in and just put a decent character journey on top of the lore work he's already done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the main thing. You needed some actual characters to root this in, which he's done, and he's done it in a quite clever way. Again, like the main characters are all people who seem kind of vaguely lost and sort of drifting through life. Again, similar to like a liminal space. The main character runs a furniture shop, and a lot of it takes place in a furniture shop, which is like really quite clever because a furniture shop is also a sort of liminal space. Yeah, it's a fake version of living rooms and bedrooms and stuff, and that's kind of good. And the film is quite good at like having lots of like liminal spaces in it outside of the back rooms. There's a bit that takes place in a hospital. There's like various other liminal spaces, so it's got this kind of creepy edge to it of like, is all life just liminal space and the back rooms is just part of that, which is that's kind of, again, that's what you need for the atmosphere to be like consistent and scary throughout.
Because the thing with the Backrooms YouTube videos is that there wasn't actually that much time spent in, I guess, the vaguely relatable real world outside of the Backrooms. It was all either Backrooms or this sort of sci-fi lab thing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I think if anything, probably it makes the horror work a bit better to actually, bring it back a bit to the real things they're sort of invoking.
Yeah, exactly. Like you need your characters to be going through something emotional that's also like kind of horror adjacent and things like that. I mean, you need that for kind of every film. Like the best superhero movies and like the Marvel things are usually like the characters overcoming something psychologically that also is like relatable and personal, as well as like, they're overcoming that as connected to their superhero journey. So, like Spider-Man, he's coming to terms with how Uncle Ben died. Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi one, it's about his personal relationship with his academic mentor Doc Ock, as well as the chases. And like, or within like horror, like possibly my favorite horror movie of all time, Don't Look Now. Opening scene, a couple, their daughter dies in a horrible accident. A lot of the rest of the film, they're a family grieving, going over the loss of a child, something that we can all relate to as one of the most terrible things that someone could go through. And then on top of that, they layer the supernatural elements, the hauntings, the psychic visions, things like that. And that's why Don't Look Now really, really works. It's a great horror movie, and that element is here as well in the Backrooms, without wanting to go into too much detail.
Yeah, obviously the fact that I may one day see this myself is forcing Alistair to be very tentative on the story details. Apologies if this is interfering with your listening experience. But it sounds good. I'm glad this was decent. I know you were quite excited for this.
Yes, I was very excited for this. Obviously, it's a big fan of the Backrooms films, the short films, and a fan of A24, and it's one of those things. And like, I think we said in our discussion of the Backrooms videos, it's like, will this work as a film? Will it scale up? A lot of things don't, but it certainly does. I think it really helps. They've got really good people involved. Ejiofor is a great actor. I also really like the other main character, is played by again, terrible with the pronunciations, Renate Reinsve, Norwegian actress, who's really, really good. Obviously, we saw her
in Sentimental Value.
Yes.
Okay.
And I absolutely loved her in The Worst Person in the World. Yeah, no, she's excellent in this. Yeah, and then they've also got just all the little things are right. Again, Kane Parsons' imagination, like again, like the little details that bring things, to life. Like, again, all the liminal spaces, how they're woven into the rest of the film and things like that. Yeah, and it's crucially like set in like, it's kind of unspecific when it's set. I think it's like, early 90s or something. Yeah, crucially the pre-smartphone era, when people have to use like handheld VHS cameras to capture things, which again makes it much easier. So it's very well thought through.
Yeah, I guess so, because the aesthetic of the Backrooms was quite sort of rubbish 90s, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Was that vaguely when the footage was meant to be from? I can't remember.
It's kind of like vague on the details, but like, obviously it's not done in an age of like drones and, tiny cameras and things like that. In the Kane Parsons online films, they're clearly like exploring using some fairly analog technology. Yeah, which is kind of adds to it, because like it's one of those classic things where it's like, there's lots of things like, does horror work with modern technology? Like there's always a lot of conspicuous like, my phone died, or oh no, we have no signal. But they got around that again by saying this in the sort of vague past.
Nice.
But I just want to recommend this. It's got a good chance of getting into the top 5 of the year. Yes, so I've been in the cinema. Nick, what have you been up to?
I've been in my house, and I've been watching the first half of the second season of Rivals, the Disney Plus series about posh people bonking their way through rural England. This is, of course, an adaptation of the Rutshire Chronicles, yes, that's Rutshire, by Dame Gilly Cooper, featuring a lot of British actors you somewhat recognise, but primarily it's David Tennant and Aidan Turner from Being Human and Poldark, engaged in this bitter franchise war against each other to try and win the local ITV franchise for the Rutshire area. And yeah, they've each got their own business. They're at each other's throats. They're sleeping with each other's wives. Their wives are sleeping with other people. Other people are sleeping with other people's wives. Occasionally, married couples are even sleeping with each other, although not that often, it has to be said. It's a mess. And yes, I saw the first season of this a couple of years ago, and it was really good. Just solid, camp, silly fun. Got a very good sense of the 80s. It's got the fashion, it's got the music, crucially, it's got the television. There's a lot of sequences of sort of 80s local ITV franchise TV, sort of rubbish weather reports and arguing over who gets to film the local dog show. There's some sort of drama series called Four Men Went to Mow. It's never made clear what this show is actually about, apart from the fact that it features 4 often topless men with lawnmowers. And
okay, that's funny. That's funny.
It is, yeah. Yeah, one of the major storylines this year is Aidan Turner's wife, played by Victoria Smurfit, who I remember from Ballykiss Angel back in the day, is the new female lead on Four Men Went to Mow. She's going to really whip those men into shape, whatever it is they're doing. But yeah, it's silly. It's got very good sort of momentum. It's got a lot of hot people with good chemistry. David Tennant and Aidan Turner and all the actors, to be honest, are clearly having a fun time. Danny Dyer's in it, playing against type as a quiet, sensitive man trapped in a loveless marriage and doing it really well.
I've heard good things about Danny Dyer in this, and everyone. I think it's one of those things, like, I can't believe it took them this long to realise, like, Jilly Cooper's really, really popular. I mean, I don't know, maybe they've done, like, BBC or ITV adaptations of her work. I don't know if it was just considered, I don't know, like, not intellectual enough. But, like, there's plenty of, like, popular pulp novels, shall we say, that have been turned into successful TV shows and film series. I'm surprised it took them this long to do this with Jilly Cooper. But yeah, someone had an idea, which is like, a group of actors we all know and like in a popular series of books. Turns out it's good.
Yeah, and just really committing to it, to be honest. Like I say, there is a sort of a reasonably high level of camp, but I don't think there's ever any MCU-style ironic winking. Everyone's very, very committed to the bonk busting. Everyone's taking it very seriously within itself. There's a scene in one episode where David Tennant successfully sabotages a rival's show by stealing the tapes, and there's just a whole, 2-minute sequence soundtracked to some banging 80s pop of him just dancing around his living room, ripping the actual magnetic tape out of these videotapes and just grinning and jumping up and down and dancing in slow motion, and it's great. Yeah, you got to commit.
Yeah, I can imagine David Tennant is very well cast for this, because you want someone who's a good actor, sort of a big name, a draw to get you in, but I guess someone who also can do stuff that isn't really, really serious. He can do stuff that's a bit funny, that's a bit tongue-in-cheek. He's pitched to the right level, I guess is the only way I can really describe it. I think that's really, really good casting. And also, I get the feeling that these characters are sort of likeable rogues sort of thing, and again, maybe playing a bit against the type of the Doctor, who is very much a straight up good guy with a dark side, whereas he's good at doing an anti-hero. And obviously we've seen him do straight up villains in Jessica Jones.
I mean, he is playing probably the closest there is to a villain in this as well. There are a few minutes where you see his softer side, or at least his vulnerability, but he is playing a bit of a bastard here. He is the guy who comes in and, yeah, again, as I just said, sabotages your TV show and then stares you down with a little smirk and goes, I don't know what happened. I don't know who could possibly have stolen your tape.
Yeah.
It's all very good. Yeah, this is another post-Doctor Who villain role for David Tennant. Having fun.
Yeah, I can imagine he's very good at it. This has certainly been hugely successful. A lot of people have been talking about it. The second series has got a big bus and I think Tube as well advertising campaign in London. I guess they're using it to push the Disney Plus subscriptions, but yeah, it does seem to be something they've really pulled out the stops on.
Again, yeah, they've really put a lot of money into making it look like it's from the 80s. It's good. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the only real complaints I could possibly find about it is the same complaints I had about the first season, which is that there's one of the main characters, Taggy. I haven't actually looked up the actor's name, but the main character, Taggy, who is a sort of nice, young, relatable girl who's a bit smitten with one of the leads, is a bit boring and wet, to be honest. I think there's been some effort to moderate it this season. She's given a bit more to do other than just pining, and I don't think she's got quite as much screen time. I think they've maybe given a bit more time to the more interesting characters, but yeah, she's still in it. She's still not the most interesting character in the world, but I don't think it stands out quite as much as it did last year, so fair enough, they're still refining it.
And she's supposed to be the kind of relatable every person who gets drawn into this world of rivalry and bonking.
I think so, yeah, although as often happens in these shows, once you've done the introductions, you arguably don't need the relatable point of view character as much, and you can maybe start playing them down a little bit.
And they get outshined by the bigger, more over-the-top bizarre characters in this strange new world that the relatable main characters wandered into.
Yeah, exactly. You can just spend all your time on the actually good, interesting characters played by big actors, massively overacting. But yeah, no, this is really good. If you can at all find it in your heart to watch this sort of fun, camp, romance, blockbuster stuff, then I do highly recommend it. It's very, very good.
Right, from the Backrooms and the bonking through to Euphoria, which also has bonking in it. But
Yes, fun camp
but it's
bonking
sad.
to sad bonking, sad bonking.
It's very,
But-
very sad. It's like, yeah, these people are dead on the inside, yet they're still bonking. Next up, this episode, we are discussing the third and final season of Euphoria, viral smash hit TV show created by Sam Levinson, the creator of Assassination Nation, which was one of my favourite films at the London Film Festival. He's taken his signature hyper-real, slightly surreal, lurid style and applied it to teen culture and how modern Gen Z life is just a sort of morally void, bleak existence which reflects on America. This final season picks up a few years after the previous one, both in terms of our timeline and the characters' timeline. It skips them ahead to their mid-20s. We're very much post-high school and seeing what the characters are up to in their 20s, and it's more of the same bleakness. This season features main character Ruby, played by Zendaya, getting drawn into the world of underground strip clubs, drug mules, and gang violence. This has been a bit of a hit. I'm surprised they managed to get the entire cast back now that lots of the people are pretty high profile, but they managed to get them together for one final season. We've seen the whole thing on Now TV. Nick, what did you think of it?
For quite a while on the podcast now, we've had a policy of not often covering things that have been universally panned and everyone seems to broadly agree are bad. But every so often, one of these things is also something we were already covering, so we decided to make an exception. And lo, here we are. This isn't great. It's getting into interesting failure territory in that it's kind of fascinating how they decided to try and continue this show and the decisions they've made to basically turn this school drama with a sort of fringe of crime and lurid sex work stuff into basically a full-on drama about crime and sex work in a way that just doesn't fully work. It's turned into such an arch genre parody. We spend so much time with these people who are like broad sketches of criminals that it just takes away from the, I don't know, like this show used to be a vaguely sort of relatable tragedy. There used to be a vague sense that this could happen to anyone you know, even though it was still stupid. And it's just become so silly. I mean, it's still depressing, don't get me wrong. If you want to feel sad, this is still a good show to watch. It's still a massive bummer, but it's just so lurid and trashy that it's just become sadness porn without really much to hang it on. I found it occasionally quite entertaining in a sort of Venom, Let There Be Carnage, oh my god, what are they doing now way, but I cannot say I cared. The emotional connection, apart from a few scenes where humanity briefly shone through, the emotional connection was basically gone.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things when they probably shouldn't have made another season. Partly because I really liked where they left at the end of the second season. A very nice ending with, they got to the end of high school, they graduated. The main character, Ruby, which her plot line is basically her dealing with, her addiction to downers and prescription painkillers. She got clean and she seemed to, turn over a better slate, and they erased, most of it. And it's quite emotionally unsatisfying to do that, basically kind of undoing that good ending so they can get more. Pretty much straight away they just say oh yeah, Ruby relapsed and she's a druggie again. And I was like, well, realistic, yeah, it does happen. A lot of people struggle with addiction their whole lives, but as you say, Euphoria is kind of like a fantasy on some level with a veneer of reality, and even the bits that are supposed to be real, the kind of social realist side, are quite over the top. Yeah, a lot of violence and quite intense bits. And because it's kind of a fantasy, you kind of want the sort of satisfactory emotional arc of a Hollywood piece, such as a character learns something about themselves, they grow, they overcome their demons, they quit their addictions, and they go off into the world to live a happier life. And then just to see Ruby get dragged through the mincer again is quite, emotionally unsatisfying. I feel on an artistic level, as well as you like these characters and you don't want bad things to happen to them. It's you just undoing what you had, turning your pretty good ending into a kind of a midpoint just to get more drama. It just didn't really feel that good, and that's the kind of the most egregious form of unsatisfactory. But then they kind of do that with a lot of the other characters, which is you kind of felt they were in a better place, and then actually no, they're going to go through more horrible things. Or some characters are just put in this to suffer, such as the character of Nate, who just seems to be in this film just to suffer increasing levels of violence as he gets involved with Armenian gangsters who just get increasingly violent. Yeah, Nate was a kind of a dislikable sort of character before. He was the classic, oh yeah, he's a bit of a dipshit and a douche, but you kind of know where he's coming from because he's got a bad family upbringing and whatever. But he's also very much a type of very much a jock. He's not particularly detailed a sketch. This guy's quarterback jock guy. And now he's a bullshit real estate salesman guy running something that's sort of semi-legal Ponzi scheme. And although that's a quite dislikable character, and it's satisfying to see someone like that just suffer horribly. It's also is, yeah, as you say, kind of just misery porn, really.
Yeah, I mean, the Nate stuff, it's unsatisfying because, yeah, there was a bit more to this character. There was at least some psychological depth to it, and there really isn't. I mean, he's not in it that much, maybe because Jacob Elordi was too busy being in many, many films. I don't know. But
potentially the next James Bond. I think he's Bookie's favourite, apparently.
Sure, fine, whatever. But yeah, he's not in it that much, and as a result, they don't really get into him in any depth. As you say, he basically just turns up every so often to get tortured by a gangster again. The wedding episode with him and Cassie, which is possibly the best episode of this season, actually, just because it hasn't got quite as much stupid crime stuff in it, and it does feel vaguely relatable, and it brings a lot of the characters together in a way that gives you a bit of a flash of old Euphoria. And I quite enjoyed that, and it gives Nate a bit more to do. But unfortunately, other than that, the character doesn't get much. I mean, the storyline with him and Cassie Cassie marries Nate and then ends up, well, she goes on OnlyFans, which she wanted to do anyway, but she gets permission from Nate to throw herself into it to try and make money to pay off his debts. It's a bit silly and lurid and faintly distasteful in the same way that a lot of Euphoria is, but it does feel vaguely like something that season 1 and 2 Cassie could have ended up doing, even if it is the most bummer possible answer. And it does sort of work as a Euphoria season 3 plotline. Inevitably, it ends badly and ends before the hour and a half finale. Like, Cassie's only in about 2 scenes in the finale, because unfortunately the show increasingly clearly wants to spend as much time as possible on the Vu crime storyline, which isn't working as well.
Yeah. It's one of those just very lurid Euphoria things, such as like there are many ways to be a content creator, but obviously Euphoria focuses on like the most pornographic one. Again, the show has like a real obsession with like porn and like people's like unusual kinks. Whole sections about people who like to lick nylon stockings or do JOIs or whatever. Like, I mean, you know, it's probably all fairly vanilla stuff compared to what you can find on the internet, but like this show has like a real obsession with like people who have slight kinks and stuff, and obviously a lot of stuff about like specifically straight men who want to have sex with trans women is like another thing. The show does have like a big obsession with that, and I kind of like the idea of like Cassie being someone who's like well-meaning, a bit dim, and really wants to be famous, getting really like sucked through the mincer of like Instagram, TikTok, being an internet personality type thing. But obviously they just jump straight to the most like rude and lurid version, which is now she poses in her underwear and then sells OnlyFans. It's like, it would have been more interesting show if like she'd become like, you know, trying to create this whole like wholesome mum or like wholesome housewife thing that's like, you know, just horrible content mill of like churning out like baking recipes at like 10 a day or whatever. That I think has the same thing they're trying to say about like the darkness behind the American dream, which is the kind of the overall like theme of the whole show, but without it basically being like an excuse to have like lots of people like in like bondage gear and like getting their boobs out and things like that. Which is kind of like a lot of this show. Right?
It is. I'd have to assume that if this show goes more than 5 minutes without showing
boobs,
a moist and damp female body, then something will happen to Sam Levinson's family, because they really are going quite hard on that here. And
yeah.
Basically, yeah, there are 2 storylines. One is Cassie doing OnlyFans. The other is Vu working at a strip club. And it does enable them to cut from naked woman to naked woman with as short an interlude as possible.
Yeah. I don't know. When it was like in high school, it kind of, you know, made sense with these highly sexualized teens dressing in a very like revealing way, because their culture is like a refracted version of like mainstream culture. And obviously, and everyone's like, you know, full of hormones and not much inhibition when you're like a teenager and things like that. And it's kind of a commentary again on like the dark heart behind the American dream, but like now it's just there, like, you know, and the characters are very much like they're going into the underworld. It's not like this is like, you know, the bleakness that exists in the suburban high street, which is again like Assassination Nation, which probably we get watched at some point on the recommendations, is a really good film. There's some flaws to it, but like it's really good at the whole, you know, the dark heart behind, you know, American suburbia, which is Euphoria, especially like the first season was like best at doing, whereas this it's just like straight into the crime world. It's like we're in the world where like people get like shot outside businesses and like no one really cares. There's no even like an attempt to cover up quite a lot of the murders that take place. And bizarrely, like the whole thing also becomes a Western, especially like the latter half of this season. Like it basically becomes a full-on Western.
Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on her boss Alamo being like a cowboy, isn't there?
Yeah,
there's a lot of this Western stuff. There's a lot of religious stuff, weirdly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the religious stuff I quite like because there's like really interesting, like lots of like Sam Levinson's really good at visuals, and like there's a lot of like snakes and stuff as visual representations of Satan and things like that. That's quite good in a subtle way, but you don't really come to Euphoria for its subtlety. But yeah, this guy who's like this kind of gangster, runs strip clubs, is kind of styles himself on a cowboy, has a like Western themed strip club. But then as it goes along, it literally becomes more and more like full of the tropes of the Western genre, and I guess we're getting into like full spoiler territory. I'm not going to drop possibly one of the biggest things, but like the finale is in like the last like major dramatic scene literally ends with like a quick draw contest, you know, as if like we become full on Western. And sometimes I kind of preferred it more when it disappeared into its own genre parody thing, because it's like, well, we've clearly completely left reality behind at this point, so I might as well just enjoy this like modern Western fantasy.
Yeah, that part was odd to me because, like, okay, so this show, which has mostly been about young women being taken advantage of, and it's going to end up spending most of its 90-minute finale on random crime dudes, and the lengthy final scene is just a shootout between two middle-aged men. Sure.
Yeah, who are supporting characters, who somehow ended up being the main characters.
Absolutely, yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, Coleman Domingo's Ali character comes back, and he is very well acted. He is one of the better supporting characters, but him spending the finale going on a roaring rampage of revenge seems a bit basic. At some point, this just becomes a sort of middling Tarantino movie, to be honest.
Yeah, that's kind of like nailed it. I mean, it's kind of saved by the fact that Coleman Domingo is a great actor, and I can't remember who plays Alamo, who is good. He is acting his absolute socks off in this.
Yeah, he
role.
is really, really charismatic. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the Zendaya crime stuff, as I've implied a few times, is not very interesting and kind of tonally mismatched. But Zendaya is still a good actor, and the guy playing Alamo is also trying very hard. And they do almost save it. They do almost make those scenes at least watchable. It just, over the course of 8 episodes, it does eventually weigh you down just how stupid and out of place it all is.
It's one of those things like Sam Levinson's gift for just like the basic craft of filmmaking, which I think is what, like, you know, made something like Assassination Nation shoot to everyone's attention, is that he's really good at like an end of episode cliffhanger and things like that. And there's quite a lot of really good kind of, ooh, what's going to happen next? And when you like allow yourself to be like in it, there is quite a lot of dramatic tension to be had there. And like there's an episode that ends with the strip club being robbed by this gang of like redneck neo-Nazis who are Alamo's rival, who are some minor characters brought back from previous seasons. Then there's like an episode which ends with Alamo wanting to like bury Rue alive and things like that. And then
let's be clear. The episode ends with Rue buried up to her neck in the desert, and then Alamo is riding a horse towards her with her mallet, threatening to play polo with her head. That is what happens, and it is hilarious. I laughed like a drain at that. That was possibly the most entertaining thing in the entire season.
Yeah.
As I say, this season is largely awful, but they do have still some, as I say, Venom Let There Be Carnage-esque moments, which are so stupid I was entertained anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. But it does have an element of like, whoa, what's going to happen next? That sort of thing. It gets to the point of when you're choking down McDonald's drunk at like 3 a.m, you know, outside the tube station. You're like, well, you enjoy it while it's going down, and then you really realise it's not particularly good like later. And like the problem is with like Sam Levinson is you're supposed to be like the modern Tarantino or things like that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about the modern Tarantino. I guess Tarantino's the modern Tarantino, because he's never going to stop, is he? But you know, this idea of someone who's like films and like Euphoria is supposed to be like intellectually dense, full of like complex ideas, exploring again the dark heart of America. This idea of everything so surface detailed and everyone looks so polished and pretty and like perfect to the surface, and underneath everything's just rotten and horrible. And you know, and it really does point to this idea of like there's something really like dark in the American like psyche that is just drives people to do these like awful things, and like they can't help it, you know, and just produces these characters who are like horrible people who are doing horrible things to each other. It's like incredibly bleak, but it's supposed to be like, you know, what they used to say, this, well, they probably still do, the State of the Nation play. You know, it was supposed to be kind of like that, and it kind of was that in the first season, and it seemed like cutting edge, you know, having like trans actors playing trans characters and things like that. But like now it's become the drunk McDonald's at 3 a.m. Well, this is kind of like fun trash, isn't it? It's kind of really wandered away from what it's supposed to be.
Well, yeah, like I remember when people used to really get, well, some people, I know some people always hated Euphoria, but some people would get very, this is it, man, this is really speaking the Gen Z truth, you know, if you want to understand Gen Z, you got to watch this show. And I'm not sure they're still saying that. I'm not sure it's still really speaking to
No.
a generation.
Because it's wandered into becoming like, because it wants to be a Western, things like that. I mean, to be honest, they should have just like made a new show set in a strip club in California that's also a Western. Like, rather than this sort of thing that's supposed to be a Gen Z State of the Nation sort of affair.
I suspect he may have wandered from the brief. I don't know, really. I mean, maybe Sam Levinson's research tells him, but this is the state of Gen Z where everybody's miserable and also everyone's a sex worker. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of, I guess, trans characters played by trans actors, Hunter Schafer's Jules is also in this very briefly. Well, she's in it, to be fair. She has a role in multiple episodes. I think she has one episode which does feature her quite heavily. But yeah, she's a bit of a side character all in.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of bring back a lot of the core cast. Although they have also made the decision now, I think, to like focus it down a bit. There's quite a few of the friends who aren't in it. Like, for example, from the previous 2 series, the friend, I can't remember the character's name, who's like a plus-sized like internet model. She's not in it anymore.
Yeah.
The nice drug dealer guy who was dating Cassie's sister is also not in it, although that character ended up in prison, so he's just in prison.
The actor has passed away, to be fair.
Oh, he's the one who passed away. I knew one of them passed away. I couldn't remember who it was, yeah. Which is why, yeah, he appears using only, like, previous footage, yeah. And obviously a lot of people are very busy, like Jacob Elroy, Zendaya, Sydney Sweeney are all, like, pretty famous now.
Yeah, no, it's impressive they got them all back, and it's a shame they didn't, make a better TV show while they had them.
Yeah, but again, like, nice to see Hunter Schafer back, who's now stars in, like, horror movies and stuff. Like that one, was it Cuckoo that we saw? That was good, or was okay. Some of the characters, like Hunter Schafer especially, it did feel very much like we've only got you for like a few days, so we're going to shoot pretty much all your scenes on one set, and then like have them, only occasionally be anywhere else other than this one set.
Yeah, and I mean, those scenes are pretty good. Again, I think because they bring in a little bit more emotion and harken back to a more human angle on this. I think the scenes between Jules and Rue are some of the better scenes. And to be fair, there's another scene where Jules gets a job on a TV show, making some sort of picture to be shown in the background, and just produces this absolute nightmare fuel. Is one of the funnier bits of the whole season. So
that did make me laugh a lot.
At least they got something out of it.
Actually, yeah, that was that was quite good. Yeah, it's nice that the trans character is probably the one who's doing the best. And it's not just kind of like trans people suffering. But again, this is not like Jules being the sort of really complex, interesting character that she was in, like, especially in the first season. I don't know if they're trying to say something that like these people who like stand out as like phenomenal artists when they're teenagers and at high school, you can tell like, you're really going to be big, and just ends up kind of basically being, it fades because it's, only a few people get to be professional kind of headline grabbing artists.
Yeah,
and like I say, those are good scenes, but it's overshadowed by the vast amount of time given over to the new characters, who are the crime ones.
Yeah, but hey, at least they fairly conclusively end the show, so there won't be any more.
There's definitely, it'd be really strange if they do more. Yeah, and the sort of the final bit, I mean, I don't know how much we want to spoil, but like...
Yeah, fuck it, no one cares, and we've talked for quite a while without spoilers, so yeah, we'll talk very briefly about the big final spoiler. Spoilers. And obviously the spoiler is that Zendaya's character Rue dies from an overdose in about halfway through the 90-minute finale after being given painkillers spiked with fentanyl by Alamo because he found out she betrayed him.
Yeah.
And it's very sad, and it's one of those brief moments of humanity which actually reminds you that this show used to make you feel something. Zendaya does give her death scene a decent push, and it does work. And then, as I say, there's 45 minutes of Ali and Alamo shooting each other, which does not work as well.
Yeah, I hadn't realised that the final episode was an hour and a half, so when she died... And after the bit of her, like, Ali finding her, I was like, wow, this is like a bleak moment to end on, but I guess this is how Euphoria was always going to end. And I thought, like, just literally waiting for it to fade to black and be basically like the end. And then it's like, no, there's a whole Western-style gunslinger bit to come.
Well, okay. One last grating tonal shift.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is interesting. But then the final bit when, like, Ali goes to this family of like ranchers, these super religious ranchers who live in like South Texas, who showed Ruth some kindness at one point. He says grace and gives a prayer to say like, hope that she rests in peace. That's quite moving. When the credits roll, I was like, okay, fair to you, Sam Levinson, you can get the emotion right when it really counts. That was a kind of, if there's any note to end on after the previous, basically 8 episodes, because even though we're still in episode 8, we're very much in denouement territory and really beyond episode 8. So yeah, that was at least an alright note to end on, considering there were some bad decisions made before that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can understand focusing most of the final episode, or certainly the last half or so of the final episode, on Zendaya and Coleman Domingo, as they are 2 of the best actors in it.
Yeah, so yeah.
But yeah, there we go, Euphoria.
Euphoria, rest in peace. Finally, this episode, we will be discussing Exquisite Corpses, a new thriller comic by James Tynion IV and Michael Walsh. The 13 most powerful families in America have gathered for their annual tournament to decide who should rule in their secret shadow government that controls the real government. This is done by each choosing a champion with a different weapon who must fight it out in a small American town on Halloween. The inhabitants of this town are very much collateral damage in this process. We have read the complete first volume of this comic. Nick, what did you think of it?
I quite enjoyed this. It's kind of fun trash, but I thought it was entertainingly done. James Tynion's done a lot of sort of horror-tinged stuff. We've covered World Tree and Department of Truth at some point. He's done some other books, which I've also read. The Woods was good, and I also read quite a bit of his other book, Something is Killing the Children. And yeah, this is the sort of thing he's very comfortable with, and yeah, it's a fun job here. It's a sort of a weird merging of the horror serial killer vibe and the superhero vibe in some ways, because you've got this very horror-tinged atmosphere, but you've also got these sort of big iconic characters who are given lots of like hero power shots and stuff. He's done a lot of Batman as well. So yeah, he's very much merging some of his influences here. This is probably some of the more commercial end of his output, you know. I think World Tree may be trying to say something a bit more complicated, but this is not possibly trying to say a lot more other than rich people suck, but I do appreciate the really like high concept basicness of it. It's a well balanced execution. I did enjoy it. So much so that I think there are 3 issues in the first collection, and I've now read forward to issue 8. So that's how much I enjoyed this, I guess. I actually kept reading it.
Yeah, I do want to read more because I do want to find out exactly where this goes. Yeah, it's done with a lot of style and pizzazz. What's quite interesting is that it's sort of mixing kind of 2 tones that do go well together, but it's also slightly separate. And one is a sort of over-the-top ultra-violence, even like quite silly, cartoony approach to this, and then the other one is much more like grim and serious. And obviously, like the 2 tones go well together because, like, if you don't take the grim stuff like super seriously, and there's crucially enough of like realism in the kind of silly end, then they can kind of balance each other quite well. And you know, that's very much borne out in the 12 champions who are sent in to fight. They vary from like a guy who's just like a muscly dude with a massive mallet. Very much like a comedy character, a ridiculous serial killer in a bunny costume, basically a sort of Mickey Mouse type thing, you know, like you get from like a children's like theme park, but you know, sort of children's entertainer in a costume who likes to strangle people. Various bizarre casts of like over the top serial killers, one called The Congregation, who's a sort of religious themed stabby guy. And then you've also got like some ones you're supposed to take quite seriously, such as like probably, I don't know, the main one of the champions is this army guy who's just like a guy who's extremely good at shooting people. I don't know, Navy SEAL, Black Ops, that kind of thing. Very reminiscent, I think, of the King of Spades character from the 2nd season of Alice in Borderlands. Yeah, and they kind of balance it well. And that you're obviously supposed to take the army guy like quite seriously up to like, you know, a certain point where he's in a world where he's like shooting like some dude with a massive mallet who just likes to whack people with the mallet.
Yeah, no, it is a bit of a delicate tonal balancing act, which is pulled off much better than it is in Euphoria. Yeah, because there's also a lot of, like, grounded real-world characters for the people who actually live in this town to remind you that, you know, real people matter and these are real people they're killing. But also it does get to have its cake and eat it as well, with lots of these silly, iconic shots of these well-designed serial killers just bashing the shit out of each other.
Yeah, and also, like, it's interesting. So I read volume 1 as a complete collection, so I don't know if this is handled slightly differently if you read it issue by issue. In the back of volume 1, there's an elimination bracket that literally shows, the 12 champions and like the path to there being only one. You know, it marks out who's already been dispatched. Yeah, I think crucially some of the sillier ones are getting killed off first. Like, yeah, again, bit of spoilers, but yeah, the mallet guy is basically like, there's only like there's only a couple of jokes with him, so then he gets like brutally dispatched. The stabby religious guy also dispatched quite quickly. I can imagine one of the silly ones, maybe the strangling guy in the bunny suit, might hang around for a bit longer, preserve the tone, but I get the feeling they're moving towards a more serious thing when it'll be the more badass ones that are left at the end. Like there's the military guy, there's someone who wears this like fox mask and is like an expert swordsperson who's looks quite deadly, and will be another interesting one. One of the characters is the sister of one of the characters, you know, who's outside the battle, so there's a kind of emotional connection there, and she's like a deadly archer. There are some more serious ones as well, and I assume they're the ones you're likely to get longevity from.
Yeah, and, you know, as you might be able to tell from what Alistair just said, another thing that's impressive about this comic is the sheer size of the cast. Like, there's like 12 serial killers, there's a bunch of civilians who are living in the town trying to stay alive. There's also the rich people outside the town who are watching this all on video screens, and there's material about, you know, the different factions of them and their relationships to each other as well. It's a lot to keep track of, and it's impressive that the comic actually does manage to balance it all in a way you can actually follow.
Well, it has like a sort of feature-length opening. I mean, again, I'm not sure if you read it issue by issue, but like volume 1 is 3 issues or chapters, and the first one is like more than half the length of the volume, or about
Yeah,
half
the first chapter is, rather than a standard like 20-25 page comic, is about 40-45 pages long, I think. So yeah, they're very much giving it space.
Yeah, and introduces all the characters with kind of more time given to the ones who are going to be the main ones. But as well as the 12 champions, there's obviously the kind of interesting cast of ordinary people who get mixed into this. So there's a single mum who's treated terribly by her used car salesman of a boss. There's a young couple who are going to go out for a party on Halloween. There's a conspiracy guy who runs a petrol station. There's some EMTs as well. So there's sort of people who are like, I mean, this is again in the sort of standard horror territory, like, small town. In some ways it feels a bit Stephen King, like small town, here's a cast of like local people who are going to get swept up into something nasty. In some ways that's like my favourite part of it. These quite well drawn, again, simple, dumb, but there's enough characterization of these people to basically be like, they feel like real people living their ordinary lives in a small town that's about to get thrust into the middle of something really nasty.
I do think the Stephen King comparison is valid. I mean, I think World Tree's got a bit of the Stephen King about it as well. I think there's clearly an influence or a stylistic match for James Tynion.
If you're a horror fan or anyone, then you can't really go wrong with Stephen King. He's a big deal for a reason, I mean, some of them are quite pulpy and some of them are quite silly, especially during his more like cocaine-fueled phase. But like, I've never met a horror nut who doesn't really like Stephen King, especially when Stephen King's at his best. In fact, most people who like American literature really say like, Stephen King, when it's The Shining, he's firing on all cylinders.
And yeah, I think this is in some ways a very tropey comic. I mean, I was talking the other day about Golden Rage. By the other day, I of course mean about 2 or 3 episodes ago on this podcast, which is sort of older ladies on a murder island. And then there's of course Hunger Games, where the teens go into a murder arena. This sort of classic throw some people into the contained murder arena thing is, a standard classic trope for a reason. If you can come up with a unique take on this, and in this case it's sort of horror serial killers in the murder arena. I don't know if it's been done before, but Tynion's definitely put the necessary work into making it work here by actually, coming up with all these different interesting serial killers and actually doing the time on the world building.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, another, again, Alice in Borderland is another one sort of in that, in the sort of murder arena vibe. And yeah, I like a good murder arena story because it's got lots of good elements to it, like the defined area, like it literally says they can't leave this town, like no one can, not the civilians, not the champions. Oh, also the idea that the perimeter for the conflict gets smaller as it goes along. So yeah, they can't just like hide indefinitely. So yeah, it'll be collapsed down as it goes. Yeah, it's got all the essential elements of a thriller. You've got finite cast of characters, finite location, finite timeline, a challenge. There's also lots of these other things like the side bets. So like, for example, all of the other killers have been offered, I think, $5 billion if they manage to kill the soldier guy. So that's going to obviously come into play and things like that. So yeah, it's got all those trope-y thriller elements, but there's a reason why these stories are popular, and I really do enjoy them because they're really, really engaging. I read this whole thing in one sitting, so it was because it was literally a page turner. So I've got to find out what happens next.
Yeah, no, I think in the issues anyway, it's described as season 1, so I assume there'll be more, but the first season ends with issue 13, which will be the 3rd volume of the collections. So there is a finite ending. It will be, I guess, wrapping up this batch of serial killers by chapter 13.
Yeah, and the thing with the elimination, and I think, there's 3 chapters and 3 eliminations in the first volume, so with the elimination bracket, it does clearly indicate towards like a finite number of issues because they're going to work their way through the bracket. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to dispatch an issue, but if they don't dispatch them at a fairly regular pace, then the pacing will fade, and it is very, very well paced. So I can imagine it will proceed at a fairly brisk pace through dispatching one champion an issue towards the final showdown between the surviving champions and the poor people who've been caught in the middle of this.
Yeah, I mean, having read, as I say, I think up to about issue 8, somewhere around issue 8. Yeah, it does keep briskly knocking through them. Yeah, there's 12 of them. Got to get through them.
And you also, we're very much at this point in the early stages when it's like the ones that there's a sense of pathos, other people who get killed. So obviously the big city hammer guy, but also we're at the point of the civilians who are getting caught up are generally the dislikable ones. So the horrible boss of one of the main characters, single woman, I can imagine he's likely to get killed quite quickly because he's just an unmitigatingly horrible person. Then we're going to, obviously, as times progress, it'll move to the more tragic deaths, people that you like who unfortunately get caught in the middle of this, because it is very much aiming at that kind of ordinary people get caught in the meat grinder of the affairs of the ultra rich.
Yeah, and it's not leaning on the eat the rich angle. Well, it is, to be fair. There's quite a lot of rich people being horrible, but a lot of the subsequent issues are focusing a lot more on the action in the arena. I'm sort of assuming that maybe the rich people affairs will probably come into it more as we get towards the end and they run out of serial killers.
Yeah, but also the drama is very much focused on this town and what's happening in it. That's clearly the A plot line. The primary one. And the most interesting aspects of it is the ordinary people getting caught up in this. You know, we're kind of at the point when like some of the characters, like the EMT people, are starting to realize there's definitely something strange going on. They've cut off all the internet and the mobile phones, and some like weird, like, dead bodies are turning up. There's definitely the point where, like, you know, again, that early kind of Act 1 horror movie thing where people go like, this is not normal.
Yeah, no, in some ways, the part I'm most interested in is what happens when we get beyond this one contest and into, you know, the future or the wider world, and, you know, what the rest of this world is like, because we don't really see much outside this town and this contest, but I'm guessing that'll be material for, like, the last issue or season 2 or something.
It was playing very much with tropes of conspiracy theories. It begins with like a sort of conspiracy theory rant from the petrol station owner, who's clearly like an internet nutter, who's just, he says like, you know, it's this podcast, they're not even on Spotify, you know, sort of thing. That's part of the very much like tongue slightly in cheek tone that runs through like the whole thing. But also, it's literally about the shadow government behind the real government that controls things. And it's very much playing with this modern sense of conspiracy theories and like paranoia, and that like rich people have these secret like fucked up worlds where they do horrible things to each other and do horrible things to little people who don't matter, you know, riffing on Epstein to conspiracy theories and things like that. And it's got this streak in it of like modern American paranoia that feels very like prescient and of the moment. It feels very contemporary in that sense.
Yes, in a world where we're all assuming that the billionaires are demented and evil because they keep posting demented evil things on social media. It's only a small step to them doing something like this, really.
Yeah. Exactly. This is believable. And conspiracy theories is very much that runs through like James Tynion the Fourth's work. So like, we've talked about Department of Truth, which is even more like overtly about investigating conspiracy theories, and like the main character is Lee Harvey Oswald. And World Tree again has a sort of like tech conspiracy like angle to it as well. Again with like cops and things like that investigating mysterious ritualistic murders. So it's a theme, but it does feel like very contemporary in the way that Euphoria feels like it's trying really hard to say something about modern life but doesn't really have much to say other than there's a dark heart behind the American dream, which is not exactly a new insight. This feels much more like it's playing with like contemporary issues or contemporary like fears by having this kind of paranoid conspiracy bent to it.
Yeah, as you say, clearly a bit of a theme in his work, but I really enjoyed this in quite a light way, but still it's fun. I definitely, as you say, always wanted to know what happens next, which is pretty key in your sort of serialized comic storytelling. James Tynion having a bit of a moment at the moment, I guess. He is one of the writers who is really coming through as a big name, and obviously the fact that he can just produce stuff like this is a big reason why.
Yeah, no, I can see why in that. This is really good. Like I say, it's literally a page turner. Read the whole thing in one sitting, couldn't really put it down because you really want to find out what happens next. So again, it's written, again, similar to Stephen King, that real sense of like, you got to find out what's going to happen next. There's a real skill to writing that kind of thriller. And also I must say the art is beautiful. The character design is great. The violence looks really good. Some of the best bits though are like the kind of just like little illustrations of this town, like the petrol station kind of all by itself and how bleak everything looks in this sort of October dusk kind of setting. I did really like the art, including the bits that weren't just like people just going nuts at each other.
Yeah, no, it's very atmospheric, it's very dark. I enjoyed the sort of Halloween setting just to give it a little bit of extra push in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it works well. I mean, also, like, the champions all have to wear a costume. That's one of the requirements. So, it's very Halloween themed. Again, plays with that, the iconography of American Halloween. And, it's a classic set of horror thriller thing at Halloween is good. And, again, playing with the iconography through, like, costumes and scares and things like that. And, again, like, if you're going to have a town where, like, serial killers and people in masks with swords are going to wander the street and it not instantly basically be, like, pandemonium, Halloween's the night to do that.
And I appreciate the sort of, I don't know, I guess it's somewhere between like superheroes and the sort of iconic serial killer monsters you get in like big horror movie franchises are probably the two big things you're sort of drawing on to create these like 12 iconic characters, all drawing on different flavours of serial killer. From, as you say, the mascot to the samurai wearing a fox mask to this annoying gamer kid who just has a drone. And coming up with 12 different unique designs which are all kind of memorable in their own way and differently themed is impressive in itself, and I enjoyed seeing them all in action. As I say, obviously I've read another 8 to 10 issues, so most of them have had a moment at this point, and it is impressive how they keep juggling them.
Yeah, there's a Harold Shipman style nurse who's a serial killer. There's someone who's like a pretty boy but also is like an axe murderer. Yeah, by the end of issue 3, some of them haven't done very much, but the tension is building, and I'm sure there's going to be some nasty stuff to come. Yeah,
and I'll be interested to see if he's going to keep, ladling these big designs out 12 at a time over the course of subsequent seasons, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. And that was Moderate Fantasy Violence. Thank you very much for listening. As ever, if you've enjoyed this, then you can go to our website at moderatefantasyviolence.com and listen to our many past episodes, plus our various essays, end-of-year lists, etc. And if you particularly like that, then why not go to your podcast application of choice or anywhere else you can review stuff. Are we on Trustpilot? Who knows? And leave us a nice 5-star review.
You can also find more of us on social media. Follow us on Blue Sky, where we're at MFV Podcast, and follow us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence. You can get more from me on social media by searching for Alistair Ball on TikTok, Instagram, or Blue Sky. You can also find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. You can find my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com, or you can go to any of my social media profiles if you want to sign up to my newsletter.
And you can get more from me at nickbryan.com on the internet, where you can also sign up to my newsletter if you like, and hear from me every month about my self-published comics. I'm also on social media as nickbryan.com on Blue Sky with a dot, and on Instagram with the word dot. And after all that, you can come back here in a couple of weeks when we will be tackling some of the big blockbusters of the summer with Disclosure Day and Supergirl. Oh yeah. See you in 2 weeks for that. Bye-bye.
Bye.